Welcome to the Lead.Teach.Parent podcast, where you will hear powerful leaders, teachers, and parents break down critical moments that define how they lead today. With your critical moments, dear listener, you can boost your productivity, strengthen your relationships, and grow financially while empowering the generation you lead to do the same. I'm known as Mother Gopi Gita. I'm an educational consultant for an international society and an executive coach for school and corporate leaders. Lead.Teach.Parent.com. Do share, share, share. We can revolutionize a future together.
Today, our guest is Ken Nelson, Dr. Ken Nelson. I'm so grateful that he's been here. I've been wanting to talk to him for over 3 or 4 months. And Ken, so grateful that you have made the time to be here with us today. I'm going to share a little bit of your story, but then throw it to you to share more. You have a PhD in education, and you shared with me that that was the beginning of your career in teaching and learning. You found limitations in academic education for transformation, because really what you do is change hearts. And I experienced that in your life-changing workshop series. You are the author of Life Changing Workshops, and you have worked with Fortune 500 companies, institutes that promote aerospace and engineering, and leaders come to you, to your space, to slow down their state of being, to dig really deeply into their inner essence and shift the leadership spaces that they guide. And so, hi, Ken, welcome.
Thank you, Gopi. I'm delighted to be with you today and for a very important topic. And I'm looking forward to the questions that you have for me.
All right, excellent. Before we begin, this is our beginning. We start with mantra. And I was privileged, Ken, to be in your week workshop this past April. And you invited me to present leadership parenting and mantra to your entire group of leaders that you were guiding. That was on the day of my 30th anniversary with mantra. And I will never forget walking into the space and you dancing with your guitar and singing. It was so enjoyable. And so I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about how I'm here in the internet space with you and doing this podcast and getting to sing mantra again with you. So we started our podcast with mantra. Mantra is transcendental sound, affirmations that help connect the internal space and the external spaces to discover deeply what your voice is, how you're going to speak your voice, what you're going to say and do, and who you're going to lead and guide. So we begin with a deep breath. And I'm not a professional singer, and so I'm leaning into being heard, even if it's going to be tone deaf. And that, I mean, even it's going to be tonally off, and that's okay. We lean into our imperfections in leadership and in parenting. I'll start with the mantra Om. And Ken, you had started your workshops with the mantra Om as well. I kind of stole that idea from you, by the way. And I'd love for you to join me and we can do Om together.
Thank you.
Om. Om. All right, and then we start with the Maha mantra, which is the most powerful mantra on this planet, which guides leadership parents. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. You can respond.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
All right, wonderful. So, what I remember about being in your space and learning from you was how we were all seated on a um, beautiful light wood oak floor. And because I've been doing workshops in corporate spaces, this was an experience, a new experience to be a part of a workshop where it was like a yoga center, yoga room with mats. And you had these the
Back
space
check.
had these back chairs, yeah, that we
Oh,
could lean on.
mhm.
We could lean on with the traditional yoga blanket, rather, like under us and behind us. And we sat in a circle, and every single one of the participants, you guided us to look at each other.
Mm.
And it was so confronting at first. And then because you're pushing yourself out of your, I'm a bit of an introvert. So you're pushing yourself out of your introverted space to reach out with your eyes to like see who else is here. And that collaborative setting that was sparked as soon as we began,
Mm.
where you know, encouraged us to check in with the group that we're with energetically. That was something that was a really powerful moment for me that I wanted to share. And Ken, for our listeners, Ken has a gift where he is able to connect the body and the mind in such a way that deep learning and wisdom emerges from that activity that he's leading. And most of the people in that space were facilitators and workshop leaders, and even some founders, some owners who were managing their own education processes at work, where they had to teach others how to do specific things. And it was just really incredible. Yeah, meeting meeting so many people there. So my question for you is, if you were in front of a room of leaders who have work and tasks and relationships to manage, not only their own with their families, but at work, like conflict resolution and productivity, and they're living fast, hustly bustly lives. what would you share with them?
Well, first of all, I think slowing down and getting centered, your presence is really the most important thing as an embodied leader. And the reason we do these circles rather than sitting in theater seating is to promote the group wisdom. The aim of the workshops, retreats, trainings is not to promote individuals necessarily, but the group wisdom itself. So our aim is creating the conditions for transformation so that each individual soars on the thermals created by the group, because the group is much smarter than any one individual or several individuals within it. So how to promote the wisdom of the group is our aim in these kinds of transformational workshops and trainings.
Okay, so group wisdom brings me a circle, and this idea of group wisdom takes off the pressure of a person to be perfect.
Yeah, being perfect is slightly overrated, because when you put yourself on a pedestal, obviously you can't stay there. Because it's so easy to find your own faults, and others will find them for you. So it's not as exactly. It's something that, of course, is natural, that we all we all suffer, we all have challenges, we all have difficulties in our lives, and if we're not real about those, we can look very slick, but slick is deadly. It doesn't promote cooperation, communication, authenticity, a genuine connection with people. So you have to be yourself, and that, I think, is one of the most important things about an embodied leader.
I love that. Slick is deadly. I feel like that could be the title of a book. Yes, and the idea of the circle, in our Bhakti literature, circles, signifies completion. There's a Om Purnam, Ada Purnam sutra, concise, like aphorism, concise statement that teaches about imperfections within the perfect unit, within the perfect circle. And that's the mood behind leadership parenting, that we lean into our imperfections. We, as you're saying, we be okay to not be slick. We look deeply, and this is a deep practice for me as well, because perfection is such an important value of mine. And so imperfection, I'm like discovering how to be comfortable with it and how to speak about it and how to use it as a booster in my relationships, especially in my relationships where I'm the leader, to be okay with showing that I make mistakes. On that theme and on that note, were there any moments in your own leadership development or in the leaders that you guide where you felt this theme of imperfection came out more, or a challenge that you faced to showcase your own imperfections as you began this journey or continued this journey of leadership?
Well, I was trained more traditionally in the academic world. I have a PhD in education, and what I noticed about the limitations of the academic world is that oftentimes, you're simply on the surface level with information, and information is necessary, but it's not sufficient to dive deeper into who we really are, into our emotional world and into our spiritual world. And so when I first encountered these circle training environments, it was a challenge for me, because I had to step outside of step down from the platform and around the lectern and just engage with people directly. And for me, it was a real challenge to be that close and vulnerable. And so learning how to be vulnerable and being okay with it was a big challenge. I think it's a big challenge for many of us who are trained to be a kind of sometimes a disembodied leader who's just giving information. But we think that there are kind of three levels or three kinds of workshops or trainings. There's the informational level, kind of the conventional one where you're lecturing. And then there's the experiential, which is more skill-based, and you're actually doing something. You're learning certain skills by doing them. And then there's the transformational model. The transformational model incorporates both information and experience, the experiential model. But it goes beyond that toward identity as to who you really are. And that separates the transformational workshop from these others that are very important. Sometimes information is the very thing that you want, and you get that kind of information from a PowerPoint presentation. But yes, but here, but it only goes so far. And if you want to really make a deeper impact with people, the transformational model is much, much, much more powerful.
Yes. And so one level is sharing information, another level is sharing experiences, and deeper than that is sharing wisdom, sharing like that innate inner essence, bringing that out through the crafted activities that you share. Ken, for our listeners who are on their way to, say, Intel, corporate parents who are working in engineering, in medicine, who have don't have the ability to guide their teams or themselves, don't have the time. Life has a long list of objectives, to use an educational term. How would you recommend that they connect in a transformational way with specifically the teams that they may guide at work?
Well, I think the first thing is recognizing that self-awareness is the key to transformation, so that we're helping ourselves and others get to who they really are through this process of self-awareness or mindfulness training in being present to what is, what's happening, and to put ourselves off to the side. We have a kind of a triangle of aims, and in this model that we're teaching. And so the embodied leader is not the sage on the stage in the center. You're not you're more of a guide on the side. And that guide on the side is using this transformational model, using what we call mind-body experiences, that is direct experience in the mind-body with ourselves and with others. And the aim of that is toward the group wisdom. But around this whole circle is a holistic view of who you are and who you're working with. And these people, if you think of them as deficient in any way or lacking in something, then you have to give it to them. But if they already have everything they really need, if that's your holistic view, then you're simply just being a guide on the side and helping them to become who they really are. And that is our way of meeting, joining, and belonging into a group that's much more powerful, more intelligent, and more functional, more productive, more creative than individuals working separately.
Oh, I love how you worded that. I love that you have a model for it. It sounds really similar to some models I have in leadership parenting. And what's coming to mind right now is a client of mine who I guide in Johnson & Johnson's. And she has a team. And she just, after, I want to say 8 months, discovered that the particular team member that she's been struggling with, that we've been discussing here and there in our calls, like her discovery was this, oh, I'm energetically placing on this team member of mine my limitations and seeing those limitations within him. And what you had said about if we accept that people have what they need within them, that chit shakti, innately wise, individuals, souls are innately wise, then instead of trying to stuff them with knowledge, we will act in such a way to bring out that information. And there's so much here on this topic, and it's so interesting. I always find my connection to source comes up at different points because we're having this conversation, and last night I wrote for 5 hours, and I wrote the entire chapter on the difference between a student-led environment and a teacher-centered environment, and I used the phrases sage on the stage and guide on the side. This is for my new book, Leadership Teaching, which is going to be produced in about 6 weeks, so I'm on a writing roll here. But yeah, through you, like I feel like, Source, my name for Source is Krishna, is watching, and like we're noticing that you spent 5 hours on that. Look, Ken's talking about this. So Ken, would you say that you said that you had experienced difficulty in being vulnerable? I felt like in the training we had, your own vulnerability is what's set the stage for all of us to be vulnerable. And your eyes, they fill with tears regularly. And that sign of someone whose eyes filled with tears regularly reminds me of a very deep spiritual person connected to emotion, deep spiritual emotion. And so that's what I noticed about you. And so on that note, we'll move into the question about parenting. What was something that what was your overall parenting experience? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, if I may say something about the vulnerability and the eyes watering. Two of my favorite, most important male teachers, one of them said, both of them cry in public, and one of them said he makes every opportunity to actually cry in public. He looks for those opportunities. So it gave me a kind of permission to use my voice, my eyes, my presence. The eyes are the windows of the soul, it's been said. And so in terms of working with my parenting skills, all of us, I think, suffer in the beginning from the lack of skills. And I don't know if there's too many places where you can go to get those kinds of skills, except just getting thrown into it. And so I made the most mistakes probably of any parent. But
I love that visual. I'm going to interrupt you here, being thrown into it, because I was a very well-prepared parent. I read tons of books. I had psychology courses under me, child development courses under my belt. I had, I want to say, a stack of 15 books from Barnes and Nobles. In those days, we did not have Amazon or online book purchases. Dr. Sears, who was the alternative parenting guru of the 2000s, he lived 3 miles away from us in Laguna Beach, and I figured out how to get into his patient list and visit him and make him my kid's doctor. I was I'm gonna do this the best way ever. And the day that my beautiful son, was born, after I had 36 hours of labor, I was like, oh my God. Not the day. I want to say the day I was probably a little lala. But that month, that year, the absolute hardest year of my life. Just the confusion of you can't control. It isn't like X plus Y equals Z. There's no equation here that makes sense. And so it's the way my mind works is very logical. And it was there's no equation. There's no it's just, yeah. So, yes.
It's so fluid. It is a bit more like dancing than anything else, because you're in this relationship that is, you make a move and the other one makes a move. And there's always this interaction, and everything is fluid. It doesn't stay in one place.
Yeah, like improv dancing.
It is,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had, with my first son, I didn't get the chance to really parent as much because we separated, and her new husband, they lived a long way away, and I didn't see my first son very much during his uh, growing years, but we're very, very close now. But it was my second son that I really had a lot more experience with in as a parent, and I do remember so many really touching, very close, intimate, and lovely times together, and some really challenging ones. And it turned out that he was actually diagnosed as oppositional defiant. So when, if I would like the Boston Red Sox, he would take the New York Yankees. It was always, if I wanted to go in one direction, he wanted to go in the other direction. So
Oh
we,
my.
so it was and kind of a challenging dance for me to really work with him. And I regret one moment when I really, it was just, I went over the top, and I really spanked him on his butt. It was in the winter, and I took him to a park, and I spanked him on the butt. And the glove that I had used somehow vanished. I don't know what happened to it. It was a glove my sister gave me. She bought in Florence, and it was kind of special to me. But somehow that glove simply disappeared. And it is an interesting moment because I regretted, of course, spanking my child, but I also got this kind of like hit from the universe, like don't use your hand on the kid. It was a moment of like, okay, I'm getting more of a message from the universe to be kinder, to listen, to be more available. And so that it was a moment where I really regretted it, and I got the lesson, I got the teaching.
I was so heartened and so surprised at your authenticity when you shared this with me when we talked earlier. First, because admitting this out loud gave me permission to admit out loud the mistakes that I've made, even as a guide for leadership parents and someone who's trying to establish a space where we can admit things that we struggle with out loud. I need to embody it. And I still struggle in embodying that vulnerability. I'm still working on learning how to do that. To have you comfortably and lovingly share this moment that you regret, that you feel like, oh, like, and even to like connect it to the universe, kind of giving you a consequence for it. That was really big for me to hear. And even now, I'm curious, Ken, if you may, and if you are able, to slow down that moment, to dig deeper into it. What was going on in your heart when you spanked him? What were you experiencing?
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to dive into that moment. I it was a moment that I felt from my own experience growing up, and my mother's reaction to me. She was overwhelmed. Her husband died. My father died when he was only 41 years old, and she had, my mother had 5 kids, and she was overwhelmed. And often she would get angry, we were kids. We broke things. We ran around. I fought with my younger brother, and I remember her harsh reaction. And what happened for me is I learned a kind of a rather than to pause and breathe and deepen into the moment and come from a more present place, that reactivity was what I learned as a child. And she was doing the best she could. And sometimes she was overwhelmed with the challenges that she faced.
So yeah, that generational legacy of we parent the way our parents parented us. It's a natural, spontaneous space that we jump right into of reactivity because that's what we were programmed with and accustomed to. And even deeper, what were you feeling in that moment?
Well, it was an anger of being out of control. It was control slipping away from me, wanting it my way, and being simply overwhelmed.
Yeah. We call these moments I quit moments in leadership parenting. And in leadership parenting, we spend time in the I quit moment space. We lay out all of the emotions and feelings and we take time to investigate them, to churn them, to feel them, to understand what was going on. And once we get to that bottom of really churning and feeling, then suddenly epiphanies come out and wisdom comes out. And it's really exciting to guide that process with parents. What's coming up right now is your ease with which you share this. I'm here on the podcast and I have something to share and I'm wondering if I should or not. And here you are modeling it for me. I was raised in an Asian family where hitting was pretty big. It's just a norm almost. And I found with my first child, my hand would raise easily and quickly when I would get in that I quit moment, frustrated. I wouldn't always actually hit my child, but my hand would raise and I probably did a few times until my husband, who's Caucasian and who was raised with a ton of incredible love. His mother is a direct disciple of Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Swami, who inaugurated the ISKCON movement, the Hare Krishna movement. And she had bhakti just as a natural component of discipline with her kids. She was also American and not Asian. My parents also were incredible, very powerful parents. But the, Asian upbringing is anyways, without getting into so much of that, I was after I think the first time I hit my son, he might have been 3. My husband freaked out. Absolutely not. And my husband is not an intense person. Very gentle, kind, happy, not with a ton of boundaries, just go along with the flow. And he put his foot down. And I remember for the first time since we had been married for 5 or 6 years by then, that I will actually leave you if you hit our children. And he said that statement to me. And we fought, and I'm like, this is just part of discipline. This is how you have to train the kids. And and so on the flip side of it, 20 years later, now when I talk to my boys, they're like, yeah, you're a completely different person. During my, like you said, during my beginning son's journey, I learned quite a bit, my first son's journey. And, even though I was also considered myself a child expert, a parenting expert at that time. So me just being able to share that out loud on this podcast is something that I'm grateful to you because I've been hesitant to say that. I don't believe I shared that in my book even. And so, yeah.
Well, thank you for that. It illustrates um, the dance of relationship as parents, and of course this dance of relationship with your children. And how that's done is, I think we are all unique, but we can have some, training in ways to help us to deal with the real, everyday, gritty kinds of challenges that we face. And so I love the way that you express that, these um, two philosophies, and how you can we would say using conscious communication to help you understand the other person's point of view, and sometimes we don't necessarily agree with it, but we can really hear and accept the other person's view. But in your case, your lovely family got the benefit of both of your backgrounds and your training and your presence.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I feel so fortunate to have married him. Um, this leaning into imperfections, this being okay to speak imperfections as leaders, it's a vital skill. And as parents, the parenting industry currently, not parenting industry, the society of parents, those who are with children, like if you admit that it's hard to admit that you're struggling, it's a lonely journey. Um, you admit it to your closest friends, but then when you do, you get tons of pounds of advice back at you,
Mm.
as if there is like the right way to parent.
Mm.
And we share 5 myths early on in the first chapter of the book and the program. There is no perfect parenting. There is no like do XYZ every time it'll work. It's a dance of try this. The program is based on 3 core needs and identifying how the needs are in the light space or met and how that manifests with happy friendships and tasks that are done easily, the backpack that's hung up on that hook every day when your child comes home, and the shoes that are placed just so in the right order, happy friendships, happy tasks, and purpose, motivation, like a desire to hang out with you, a desire to make their own little mark on the world. That's like the light space of the needs being filled. And then the shadow space of the needs being unfulfilled, where you get those I quit moments a lot more because you're like trying to get your kid to do something and they just won't do it. Or your child's crying because their friends are being mean, and it just continues happily happening where they don't feel like they have any relationships and they can't get along with anybody. And you just begin to wonder if it's you. So all of those dynamics, we share strategies for how you can communicate and talk through it and discuss through it. Some really powerful, easy strategies, but it's not a do this every time it will work. It's a discover how your communication and how your own actions with your child are helping them in which space, and it's all through observation. And so this call with you, I'm immediately seeing how your self-awareness of your vulnerability and your ability to own a mistake that you made or something that you did that you didn't necessarily appreciate opened up the space for me to do that. And you started the call with saying that leadership with a team, with a circle, a group wisdom space, begins with self-awareness. And your self-awareness has increased my self-awareness, which will naturally increases the self-awareness and the ability to kind of move forward. There's this phrase, pace, lead. You walk with someone and then you lead. You walk with someone and then you lead. It will increase us and our listeners' self-awareness will increase their ability to guide and lead at home and at work.
Hmm. Well, one of the ways we really get to know, as you said, about ourselves in terms of self-awareness is the feelings and needs. And you mentioned the really important needs that are met and needs that are unmet. And so these is really it. What directs and motivates human behavior are these feelings and needs. So at the heart of self-awareness, feelings and needs, and of course at the heart of communicating our feelings and needs is how we can get those needs met. And so oftentimes our training revolves around, on the facilitating side of workshops and retreats and trainings, is to help leaders to communicate their own feelings and needs, and also to generate that opportunity for everyone to share what is really happening for them at the feelings level and at the needs level, so that they can get those needs met.
Yes. And that brings me to our third section. You are a highly spiritual person, one of the more powerful spiritual beings I've met in the past year, 2 years after inaugurating Leadership Parenting. You're dancing with your guitar, singing the names of Ram on the day we celebrate Ram, the appearance of Ram, and your choice of background music and songs when we were all working and doing our projects and our activities. How does spirituality manifest itself in your leadership and in your parenting or in your leadership?
Well, what occurred for me in terms of my spiritual awakening was initially I got awakened, if you will, through body work. I worked for a Japanese company at the time, and I was given a free shiatsu massage. And wow, the sensation, the feeling, the experience of being touched at that level just awakened me into wholeness, or into myself. And that really led me to deepen my practice of yoga, meditation, and because before that, I think what was mostly was kind of a mental exercise, and meditation was a mental exercise, yoga was a physical exercise, and the body work really helped me to be more embodied, to be more in my physical self while I was practicing, whether it was meditation or yoga or qigong eventually, which is one of my primary modalities now, is Chinese. You can call it Chinese yoga. It's not exactly that, but it's the working with energy, the physical energy, the energy of the universe, the life force, the chi or the prana. And so I became much more aware of sound. And today, sound or mantra or kirtan chanting, leading chanting, listening to chanting has been my primary spiritual practice. And the sound that travels across this screen to you and to others is a profound way of connecting. Certainly the visual, but sometimes what I say is the eyes are like hunters, but the ears are more like gatherers. And so the sound that we send to one another can really, we can gather it and receive it in a very, very different way from our other senses. But ultimately, it is all about touch. The photons touching the eye, the sound waves touching the ear, whatever is touching the skin. And so how can we touch, move, motivate people? And it's through these modalities these mind-body practices, you can call them mind-body or spiritual practices. They're really spiritual technologies, whether using touch in massage, or whether using the sound of the kirtan, or the the movements of yoga or qigong. All of it comes home to this awakening of a self that otherwise is simply kind of dormant, or not quite awake. And I think many people go through life in a kind of an automatic, kind of a robotic way. And these practices are what can instill the a sense of a self that's already here and whole and complete.
I love your explanation of it. I remember when we talked earlier, the way you had explained mantra gave me the confidence to do my mantra, start my podcast with mantra and end it with mantra, because I was worried that it might be a little too woo-woo for people. Leaders in corporate spaces are like, oh, what is this? So your explanation of mantra, and then a few other interactions with others who were like, no, mantra is great. Your ability to explain how this awakens the self, your your the vocabulary you use with the elements. There's so much here. I feel like a full podcast session could be just exploring this topic. I'm so curious about the way you see it, the way you view it. Mantra for me, that sound that you talk about, is internal affirmations in Sanskrit that I am here for a reason. I am connected deeply to my source. I am full of innate wisdom. I know what to do in these moments to go deeply through the mantra, the sound of the mantra, to connect. And like you're saying, awaken that being, that part of you that's eternal, that's blissful, that's full of knowledge. And even more to connect with your source, with your beloved. And then so many names are used: God and nature, Mother Nature, your and there's so many names of God in different religions. For some reason, I don't like I don't like to use the word God, because it also has a lot of connections to wars and religious persecution. And anyways, I'm rambling here. But if you were to explain mantra to someone, how would you share the experience of mantra to someone?
First of all, I would call it it is like a prayer in a way, um, but I like the verbal prayers in this way of chanting, chanting mantra, because it uses the breath. So in that sense, in yoga, it would be a pranayama, breath control, or instilling the voice, the breath with a voice. So maybe even start with humming, that sense of vibration. So we have the pranayama, the use of the breath. We have the focus of the mind on some element of the chant, even if it's simply the vibration itself, or the sound touching the ear, or the sound of that fills the room. And it is also a way of knowing that you're alive, in a sense. There's when the body is breathing deeper, and when the mind is focused, then and the heart awakens, and you have a complete experience of body, heart, mind moving toward the object of your chant. So it is a journey of self-discovery, of inquiring through the voice, through the posture, through the mantra, of this journey of discovery of the self.
Beautiful, beautiful. And to our listeners, this journey that he's explaining, when you, as we had started with, when you have spent more time in self-discovery and self-awareness, you show up, your prana, your life breath, your presence. Your presence is magnified in every space that you enter. And when you need to connect with a challenging situation, with a challenging event or person on your team, with your kids who are in challenging spaces, crying or frustrated or angry teenagers or defiant, oppositional defiant children, because you are practiced in connecting with that mind-body space, with that heart space. The reactivity, when it arises, you're able to slow that down, dig deeper. What am I feeling? What's happening here? How am I meant to manifest in this challenging space? And then that starts showing all around you when you're in pain, when the team is in pain, when objectives aren't being hit. And what I've noticed, Ken, and I'm saying this because just this Wednesday, I think on podcasts, we don't say dates and days because, recording and publishing times are different. But just this week, just Wednesday, a client that I'm leading hit double revenue in their company. That was an end of the year goal. That was a 12-month goal. And we're 5 months in and sales doubled. Because when you practice spiritual internal processes and the external strategies that connect to those processes, you are always present. You're practicing being present more clearly, more deeply, and conflicts dissolve. Her team's conflicts, her team's challenges, and the empowerment that everybody felt, and numbers are just pouring in, sales are just pouring in. And so it was such a like, oh my goodness, I've had a few clients who have been able to do this. And it was such an exciting, like, wow, really? Because every moment becomes service. And so in a service space, things are exponential. So yeah, we will end now, unless if you were in front of 10,000 parents in leadership who guide others and guide their families, Ken, what would be final words for you, final words of wisdom that you would like to share with them?
We've come back to the notion of vulnerability and imperfection. And one of the most profound teachings that I learned at Kripalu was formerly it was an ashram. Today it's a retreat training center. But we were founded in the yoga tradition. And Swami Kripalu said, "My beloved child, break your heart no longer. Break your heart no longer. Each time you judge yourself, you break your own heart." And that's really stuck with me. And his notion that the highest quality of a spiritual seeker is self-observation without judgment, which is the point of the practice, that judging ourselves and others is a kind of normal, natural, but how does it serve the long-term goal of really establishing ourselves in relationship to others for in our purpose, for the purpose of group wisdom, for collective prosperity.
Beautiful. And what a perfect note to end on. Self-observation without judgment. Being able to accept that we have I quit moments, that we're not perfect, that just like a car mechanic has to have 12 years of study to become a car mechanic, to be a mechanic of children, to be working with and guiding and facilitating children, it is okay for us to do some study on it and have some guidance, self-observation without judgment. And so we will end now with the mantra. And to all of our listeners, the podcast is new. We request you to hit that share button, to think of a leader that you respect, that you love, to think of a parent that you respect and love, an educator who's working with children that you respect and love, and to send a personal message to them and ask them to join to join the energetic space of this podcast so that all together we can, with group wisdom, support those who are supporting others. And really, you're showing the person you're sharing it to that I respect you as a leader, I value you, and check out this incredibly amazing thing I just listened to. Ken Nelson and Mother Gopi Gita are sharing wisdom for the world. And listen, please. So please do share as much as you can. So we will end with our mantra. My favorite mantra that I'm totally in love with is totally conscious and guiding us to discovery of our true spiritual selves. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And I'd love to hear your voice now, Ken.
Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama.
And now I will do 4 words at a time. And those of you who are listening, you can also join along. Your voice doesn't have to sound good. You may stumble, the words may be mixed up. It's all accepted. We lean into our imperfections and know that they are non-judged by our supreme spiritual selves and source. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Hare Rama.
Hare Rama, Hare Rama.
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Hare Rama.
Hare Rama, Hare Rama.
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
All right, thank you. Dear listeners, please go to leadershipparenting.com. Join me on LinkedIn and Instagram, Leadership Parenting, share, comment, like, connect with me, and also wherever podcasts are, I think, the usual. All right, we will end now and see you next time.